This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Bershus the Rav Shlita, Rav Oshri. I do have some yichus, more than just that I come from Flatbush. Actually, my grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather was a Talmud Muvak of Rabbi Menachem Zemba, a ben bayis by Rabbi Menachem Zemba. And my grandfather had smicha before the war from the Warsaw Rav. And I actually always felt a very strong kesher to Shal Sechuvas Mimamakim. Over the years, I've given many Shiurim from Shal Sechuvas Mimamakim. And even though I know Minog Yisrael Kodesh, Matzoi Shabbos, you say over Sipurei Tzadikim, sometimes more mush than drush. But how could I come to this Makom Kadosh and not say over something from Shal Sechuvas Mimamakim? So with your permission, I'm going to ask you to halt cup a little bit. What they say in the yeshiva is put on your lamdasha glasses. And I want to speak out a shaila from the Holocaust, and to bring out a little bit how the Shal Sechuvas Mimamakim is mamish, a timeless work. The yesoidos of lamdus that we see there apply mamish in the inyanim that we are living through today, and we see how the Torah is timeless. I'm going to take you back this evening to the 26th day of Elul, 1941, Tafshin Pei Aleph, the Kovna Ghetto, where the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, said we need 1,000 Yidden to work in the airport. This is Chelik Aleph, Siman Beis. We need 1,000 Yidden to work in the airport, and the ration of food was one soup a day, but the soup was pigul, the soup was not kosher. And a number of Yidden came to Rav Oshri, and with the following shaila. By the way, if you look at the nusach of the lashon of the tshuvas, mamish written very poetically, very a literary style. And the shaila was, could these Yidden eat the tray food to keep themselves alive? So what's it tolayan? He says the shaila is, how do we define pikuach nefashos? It's pikuach nefesh because right now they were healthy to some extent. They were worn out, they were weak, but they were not cholim yet. The shaila is, right now, today, they don't need to eat the soup. But if they don't eat the soup today or tomorrow or the next day, ultimately it would bring them to a matzav of mamish sakanas nefashos. The question is, in halacha, how do we define sakanas nefashos? Is it right now if the person's life is in danger? Or do we say that if they don't partake of a davar isser, it could lead to a situation that could bring to sakana? Is that already considered sakana? That's the yisoid of the shaila Chelek Aleph Siman Beis. So of course we know the Gemara in Masechta Yuma Daf Pei Gimel. The Gemara says if you have a chayla on Yom Kippurim, and the chayla says I need to eat, and the roife says I don't need to eat. So what's the halacha? We listen to the chayla. Why? Leiv yoidei amaras nafshay. A person knows his own misery, so to speak. A person may know even better than the chayla. The Gemara says, what if the roife says he needs to eat, and the chayla says I don't need to eat? You listen to the roife. Safek sakana l'kula. Comes the Torah in Siman Taf Reish Yud Ches. Listen to the lashon of the Torah. This is all quoted in the Tshuva. Says the Torah, Choylesh et tzarech lecha em yesham roife baki. You have a proficient doctor. Shoimem lo yidnu lo efsher sheyichbad alav hachoyli. It could be if he doesn't eat, the illness will prevail. V'yistakein, and it could be he'll be in sakana. Machilin oisay al piv. Ve'ein tzarech sheyoymar shema yamas. You don't need to know maybe he'll die. You don't need the doctor to say maybe he'll die. If the doctor says efsher that it could come to a sakana, doesn't mean today, it doesn't mean tomorrow, but the situation will lead to a sakana. It's mavur in the Torah. The tshuva brings that's also considered sakanas nefashos. Lefi zeh, the Rav, the Bal Mechaber, Shal Sechuvas Mimamakim, by the way, it was written in the Holocaust and it was buried. And he came back after to that Makom. By the way, historically, there are many, many works that were written by Gedolim, they were buried, and they came back after. For example, the Tzrar Hamar, now we're going back to the 15th century. Tzrar Hamar, because of Inquisition, he buried it and he came back to find it. So this is the argument offered by the Shalosh Teshuvos Mimamakim, that this seems to indicate that the definition of pikuach nefashis is not right now the person is sakana, if it's could lead to sakana ultimately. You'll see where I'm going with this for what's happening in today's world. Says Shalosh Teshuvos Mimamakim, but maybe you could be mechalek. Maybe there the person is a choyle, so right now he's ill. Once a person is ill, he's in a predicament where if he doesn't take care of himself, it's likely to lead to endangering his life. But these people working in the airport, yes, they're weak. Yes, they're famished, but they're not choylem. They're not choylem. So you'll say, but it will lead to that situation. But you can't bring a raya from the Torah, because the Torah is talking about a situation where someone is already a choyle. So the Mimamakim brings and marshals another interesting Gemara. Gemara in Shabbos Samach Tes. So if you're lost in the desert, you know the famous Gemara, you're lost in the desert, so what do? You count 6 days, and the 7th day, you treat as Shabbos. And the Gemara says, are you allowed to work? So the Gemara says, the first 6 days, you work Kedei Parnasasai. Frek the Gemara, so what do you do on the day that you decide is Shabbos? The Gemara says, on that day you don't work. Frek the Gemara, what should you do? You should die on that day? So the Gemara says, no, on that day you go to work also. So the Gemara says, so what's the difference between the 6 days and the day you consider Shabbos? The Gemara says, no major difference. Just that you make Kiddush on the 7th day, and you make Havdalah on the 7th day. So now we have a machlokes achronim. Because the Gemara ultimately concludes, very interestingly, that you go to work every day. But what if you're able to fast one day? So do we say if you're able to fast, you have no right to work? Safek Shabbos l'chumrah. So they have a very interesting machlokes achronim. The Tosfos Shabbos says if you're able to fast, you're mechuyev to fast. You can only go to work if you're not able to fast that day. But the Big Day Yesha says even if you're able to fast, you need to go to work because you got to get out of the situation as soon as possible, because it's a situation that ultimately could lead to sakana. So based on this psak of the Big Day Yesha, the Mimamakim, by the way, right now it's in a red volume over here, and the print is ripping. And I wasn't asked to do this. I'm doing this selfishly. This sefer has to be reprinted. I know, but we need people to help it get reprinted. So if you want to be mezakeh Klal Yisrael, you'll see, because these are yesodos and halacha that we need today. You'll see. The Mimamakim argues halacha l'maisa, and he says he later met the Kavna Rav Ram Dov Bar Kahana Shapiro. He was maskim lahalacha. It was mutter for these people working in the airport to eat tarfis in order to preserve their life. So where am I going with this? A very interesting shaila. You have hostages in Gaza. Yeah? The Israeli government wants to say, we're going to rescue them. How? We'll give you back 100 terrorists, 1,000 terrorists, for one Yiddish neshama. Are you allowed to trade 100 terrorists, 1,000 terrorists, to save one Jewish life? Koach nefashos. So there's a few shilas up here. Number one, ein poidin es hashvuyin yaser mikdei demeim. There's a takana, you can't redeem a captive for more than the value. 100 terrorists, l'chayra is yaser mikdei damav, of one Jewish soul. Unless you argue that the din of ein poidin es hashvuyin yaser mikdei demeim is only if the person's life is not on the line. But if the person's life is on the line, then what's the reason you're not to redeem captives more than their value? Because of duchka de tzibura, you're causing the hardship on the tzibur. But to save a Jewish life, everyone has to give as much money as possible. On the other hand, the Gemara says a svara of delay lesu lagar beitve. You don't want to encourage the goyim to kidnap more. So even if their life is on the line, you still can't give yes mikdei demem, because you're just going to encourage them to do it more. That's the shayla in halacha. There's a Chumash around Milublin. But the other big shaila is, what do you think these terrorists are going to do the day that you release them? You think they're going to go play bingo? You think they're going to go learn Shari Tshuva, Chavis Havavos, Sifrei Chasidos? What do you think they're going to do? They say what they're going to do. They've already announced what their plan is. It's mamish says, that one of the 1,000 terrorists that was given up for Gilad Shalit was the one who perpetrated the October 7th massacre. So you can imagine they give up one guy, but he's able to. So the shaila is, listen to the shaila. Right now, letting the guy go free is not putting people into sakana. It's a situation that's asi and asid lavoi lidei sakana. So is freeing the terrorist considered putting people in sakanas nefashos? Right now, today it's not, but one day it will be. So it's interesting. They asked Rabbi Vadia Yosef back by a different Maisa, and Rabbi Vadia quoted Shalsachus Noda Behuda. And Shalsachus Noda Behuda says a very interesting yisoid, which we have to think of in light of the Shalsachus Mimamakim. The Noda Behuda says like this: is it permitted to perform an autopsy on a Jewish body? Of course not. Nivel Hames. It's an Isser of Nivel Hames. What if by performing the autopsy, you could gain medical knowledge right now to rescue a Jewish patient in the hospital bed right next to him? In other words, you have two people. One of them died of a certain illness, and by doing an autopsy on Ploini, Aleph, you could figure out how to cure the choila in the next bed over. Are you allowed to do an autopsy to save the life of another patient? Avada, pikuach nefashos. That's clear. But what if, asked the Noda Behuda, by performing an autopsy, you could maybe gain medical knowledge that one day you'll learn some information that you'll be able to save someone's life in the future? Says Noda Behuda, that's not pikuach nefashos. That's not called saving a Jewish life. Saving a Jewish life means today, right now. The fact that it will ultimately lead to saving the life of a Yid, that does not have a din of pikuach nefashos or hatzalas nefashos. So Rabbi Vadia argued, conversely of the Noda Behuda, that if saving a life in the future does not have the din of hatzalas nefashos, then risking someone's life in the future does not have the din of sakanas nefashos. So if you could save a Jewish life by trading in 100 terrorists, even though tomorrow it will mean putting people's lives in danger, but the same way it's not considered hatzalah unless you're saving someone's life here and now, it's not considered sakana unless you're endangering somebody here and now. Yesh ladun on this inyan. But I'm trying to bring out that when you learn the Yisoidos in the Shalsachus Mimamakim, this is not just history. Oh, what would have been? What would have been back then? The Yisoidos of halacha, and also, of course, there are many chilukim. The chilukim are dependent on the level of possibility of hatzalah, the level of possibility of sakana. But these are not Yisoidos of commemorating something that happened 70 years ago. It's a Torah's Chaim, and all the principles that we see there are mamish noigeya in our lives, and we should only encounter them l'taiva v'levracha. I want to speak out another inyan. I will try to be makayim the inyan that Melave Malka Torah should be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the frogs. The tzvardeya. We learn a very important thing from the tzvardeya. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Pesachim, the Gemara has a shaila about Chananya, Mishael, Azariah. The Gemara asks, Maro Chananya, Mishael, Azariah shemasru atzman al kedushas Hashem. Who inspired Chananya, Mishael, Azariah? Was it a Melave Malka speech? Was it Musar Behespailos? I learned in Yeshiva Chafetz Chaim, which is a Slabotka yeshiva. So I was very excited. I thought I was coming, and I knew the Rav Oshri learned in the Slabotka. But I heard he also learned by the Chafetz Chaim and also by the Brisker Rav. It's very interesting. Chanani Mishael Azariah didn't hear a Musar Shmuz. Chanani Mishael Azariah didn't learn Musar Behespailos at that time. You know who inspired Chanani Mishael Azariah? A frog. They were inspired by the frog. Says Gemara, how they were inspired by the frog? They made a kal v'chomer. Umat svardim shein mitzuvin al kedushas Hashem. They're not mitzvah al kedushas Hashem. And yet the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Ubo, b'cha, b'veisecha, u'v'misharoisecha, u'v'sanu recha, go into the ovens. So Chanani, Mishael, Azariah made a kal v'chomer. They who are not mitzvah in kedushas Hashem and gave up their life, we certainly have to give up our life. It's very interesting that one of the greatest examples of Kiddush Hashem came about as a limud from frogs. Let's think about it. Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom bring tzvardeya on the Mitzrim? It's interesting. The Zohar HaKadosh says because they were mavatel us from Kriya Shema, Shachris, and Arvis. So the Rebbeinu Shalom brought on them tzvardeya. Now, Reb Josh mentioned I grew up in Brooklyn. So when I was a bachar, I used to walk from Emin 31st to Rav Avigdor Miller Shul. You look familiar from there, yeah? Very often on Shabbos. I heard Rav Miller for 3 years, Baruch Hashem. Why do I mention that? Rav Miller writes in a sefer, Sefardeya comes from the word Safar Yada. They know the morning. So maybe we start to see a little Midah Kneged Midah. They were mevatel us from Kriya Shema Shel Shachris Va'arvis. So the Tzvardeya, they have different shifts of Tzvardeya. They know the morning. Some are the night shift, and they stop by the morning. Some are the day shift, and they start by the morning. In any event, let's try to go a little bit deeper. One of the very frightening and harrowing tshuvas in Shal Tshuvas Mimamakim came about a few months later, after the first tshuva we mentioned. This is from Chelek Beis Siman Daled, the 5th day of Cheshvan, Tafshin Beis, where a certain Yid, Rabbi Eliyahu Varshaver, a Yid from Poland, made his way to Lita, and on the day of the liquidation of the Kovna ghetto, asked the Mimamakim, he feels his end is near. When that day comes, what bracha should he make when he's Mekadesh Hashem, when he gives up his life? And he feels this will be his last zechus, and he wants to be able to teach other Yidden the nusach habracha to make when he's Mekadesh Hashem. Or maybe you don't make a bracha at all. The Rashba argues maybe you shouldn't make a bracha. Because the same way, we don't make a bracha when you give tzedakah. Maybe the ani will say no thanks. You know, if you offer less than $1, he might turn you down. You know, and then imagine you made a bracha, you gave a quarter, and he said, no, I don't take less than $10. So the Rashba says that's why we don't make a bracha on tzedakah. So maybe you can't make a bracha on Kiddush Hashem because maybe the guy won't pull the trigger. So this was the shaila of Rabbi Eliyahu Varshaver Hashem Yimkom Damai. And the Mimamakim cites the Shla HaKadosh in the Shar HaOsiyos, who says the bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem. The shaila is, do you say le or al? And the Shla says you say le because it's Yefshar Yidei Shliach. He says the bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Lekadesh Shemai Barabin. And this Rabbi Eliyahu went around and he taught many Yidden the Nusach HaBracha. And he said he met Rabbi Chanan. And Rabbi Chanan said he heard from the Chafetz Chaim that this is the correct psak, that you should make the bracha Lekadesh Shemai Barabin. This was the Nusach HaBracha Rabbi Chanan taught his son Rab Naftali. What's very interesting is the Magid Meisharim, told the Beis Yosef. We know the Beis Yosef had a malach that came to learn with him. The Beis Yosef was told by the malach, many times, the malach told him, that the Beis Yosef would die al Kiddush Hashem. And the question is, it never happened. It didn't happen. The Beis Yosef died al mitasai. So many achronim deal with this question. What happened to the prediction of the malach that the Beis Yosef would die al Kiddush Hashem? So I want to share with you a very simple halacha. I think this is, to a certain extent, a halacha that's not fully understood. The Mechaber Paskins in Siman Samach Aleph, Yikra Kriya Shema, Be'ema, Be'yira, Be'reses, U'vezeya. When you say Shema, it should be with fear, with awe, with trembling, shaking. Come on, why do you have to get so worked up when you say Shema? You're doing a mitzvah. Why are you getting so agitated? So the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Tshuvas HaRashba. Tshuvas HaRashba says, part of Kabbalas Malchus Shamayim. Okay, so that means before you say Shema, you have to at least think two things. Number one, you have to be mechavein to mekayim the mitzvah saseh of Kriya Shema. Number two, you need to think you're mekabel Malchus Shamayim ad kidei kach that if you were ever put to the ultimate test, you'd give up your life al Kiddush Hashem. That's an Iker Kavana in Kriya Shema. By the way, you know that Avodraham says, Shema, Su'u Maroim Einechem, Shema, Shakai, Melech, Oilam, Shema, Shachris, Mincha, Arvis, Shema, El Malchus Shemayim. 4 kavanos of Rashi Tevos in the word Shema. But one of the important kavanos is that if ever put to the ultimate test, one would give up their life al Kiddush Hashem. And if you think that, it's Ki'ilu you did it. So the Mavri Yaboik writes, the Beis Yosef certainly was Mekayim Divrei Atzmai, and whenever he said Shema, he was Mechavein this Kavana, so it's Ki'ilu, he was Moiser Nafsha al Kiddush Hashem. Ure'ezeh Pella then, that the Mitzrim tried to be Mevatel us from Kriya Shema, which means they didn't allow us to have this Kabbalah and this Kavana that we would Mekabel on ourselves to be Moiser Nefesh HaKadosh Hashem. So Mida Keneged Mida, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you're not letting the Yidden have this Kavana. I'm going to send Makas Tzvardeya. You know what we're going to learn from Makas Tzvardeya? We learn from there the Chiyav Limsar Atzmai Al Kiddush Hashem. You're being Mevatel from Klal Yisrael, the Kabbalah to be Moiser Nefesh HaKadosh Hashem. We're going to use the Tzvardeya to teach Klal Yisrael ad kedei kach. Ure'ezeh pele, look in Parak Shira. Sifardea mahu oimer. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai Li'olam Va'ad. So the Mitzrim didn't allow the Yidden to say Shema, so they had to hear 24 hours a day. Safar Yada. Until the Boiker, Tzvardeya, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai Li'olam Va'ad, and until the Erev. So it's a great suchus to be here this evening. As I mentioned, I feel very close to these Svarim Imamakim, and Be'ezus Hashem, we should be able to learn from it, Gesundheit, Besurois Toivos, the Rebbeinu Shalom should bring Yeshua and Achamas Lanu, L'chol Yisrael B'chol Makom Shehem, Agitavach, Agizintavach, Amazel Dekavach. Thank you very much.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.